You won't believe what my father's new wife did. She sold everything I owned and expected me to stay quiet about it. Stick with me while I share my story. And if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Evan Brooks. When I was 16, I lost my mom. It was the hardest thing I had ever gone through. My father, Michael Brooks, didn't wait long before he got involved with someone new. Within a year, he married a woman named Vanessa. I tried not to judge him for moving on so fast. I thought maybe he was lonely or didn't know how to handle being alone. At first, I tried to accept her and keep things calm in the house. From the beginning, Vanessa made it very clear that she was not interested in being any kind of parental figure. She didn't yell or insult me outright, but everything she did showed I didn't belong. She moved my mom's photos from the living room to a closet without asking. She changed the curtains, the furniture layout, even the dishes we used. Every change she made pushed out the memory of my mother a little more. When I quietly asked her about it once, she shrugged and said the house needed a fresh look. Whenever my father was around, she acted warm and polite. She asked me if I needed anything or how school was going. But when it was just the two of us, she barely spoke to me unless she was giving instructions. If I left a jacket on a chair or a book on the coffee table, she would tell me to keep my things in my room, like I was a house guest. She'd correct the way I loaded the dishwasher or folded towels and make comments about how some people never learn basic habits. I told my father a few times that I felt uncomfortable. He brushed it off every time. He said I was still grieving and needed time to adjust. He said Vanessa was trying her best and that I should give her a chance. He didn't see how different she was when he wasn't in the room. I could tell he wanted peace, so eventually I stopped bringing it up. I focused on school and kept to myself. I stayed in my room most evenings to avoid awkward moments in the kitchen or living room. I tried to be polite and quiet, thinking she'd ease up if I didn't cause problems. She started making comments about college and when I would move out, even though I was still a junior in high school. She said it in a joking tone when my father was around, but I knew she meant it. There were times I caught her going through things that belonged to my mom. She'd open boxes in the hallway closet or sort through drawers that didn't belong to her. When I asked her what she was doing, she said she was just organized. I didn't feel like I had the power to stop her, especially when my father always believed her side. I kept hoping he would notice on his own, but he never did. What I didn't know then was that things were going to get much worse, and she was only getting started. Vanessa didn't rush anything at first. She made small changes and acted like they were harmless. But it didn't take long before everything in the house started to look like it belonged to her. One day, my mother's favorite chair disappeared from the living room. When I asked where it went, Vanessa said it didn't match the decor and claimed she moved it to the garage for extra space. A week later, it was gone completely. She said a neighbor picked it up because they needed it more. The china cabinet my mom had protected for years was emptied without warning. Vanessa replaced the dishes with sets she ordered online. My mother's plates and cups were put in boxes and stacked near the door like they were junk waiting to be tossed out. I tried to take the boxes to my room to keep them safe, but she stopped me and said, "You don't need to hang on to every old thing." She also didn't like anything that reminded my father of his old life. She took down framed photos, family paintings, and even a handmade quilt my grandmother gave my parents when they got married. She said she wanted the home to feel updated and fresh. It was like she was erasing the past one step at a time. Around my father, she acted polite and pleasant. She laughed at his jokes and offered to make him tea. She asked me how school was going and pretended to care. But as soon as he left the room, her tone changed. If I sat on the couch, she'd say I should be doing something useful. If I walked in while she was rearranging something, she'd tell me I was in the way. Sometimes she wouldn't even speak. She'd give me a look that made it clear I wasn't welcome. I tried to talk to my father more than once. I told him she sold my mom's chair and was getting rid of our belongings. He didn't even let me finish. He said I was too emotional and needed to stop taking everything personally. He said Vanessa was just making the house feel like home, and that I should be thankful someone cared enough to clean and organize. It felt like talking to a wall. One evening, I walked into the dining room and found her going through a box of my old school certificates and photos. When I asked her to leave those alone, she said they were taking up space and that most kids my age didn't cling to old stuff. I took the box from her, and she muttered under her breath that I was dramatic and spoiled. The worst part wasn't even what she did. It was how she acted like she had every right. If I spoke up, she twisted my words when my father came home. She would smile in front of him and say things like, "I think Evan just misses his mom. I'm trying my best." He believed every word. I started to feel like a stranger in the only home I had left. I stopped inviting friends over because I didn't want to deal with the tension or the question. I stayed in my room most of the time and avoided her as much as I could. But no matter how quiet I tried to be, she always found something to change, something to remove, or something to claim as hers. And each time I tried to tell my father, he told me I was imagining it or overreacting. That made it clear I was on my own. Tyler had invited me to join him for his college orientation week. His parents offered to let me stay with them, and getting out of the house for a couple of days sounded like a relief. I packed a small bag and left early Friday morning. Vanessa barely said goodbye, and my dad just told me to be respectful while I was gone. When I came back Sunday afternoon, I noticed cars had been parked near our driveway earlier. The lawn looked disturbed, and there were folding tables near the side of the house. At first, I thought my dad had people over or Vanessa hosted one of her cleanup days. But when I stepped into the house, something felt off immediately. The living room looked emptier than before. Items that had been there my whole life were missing. I went upstairs to my room and stopped at the doorway. My desk was bare. My shelves were empty. My guitar stand was there, but the guitar was gone. The drawers were half open with nothing inside. My computer, the one I saved up for and built piece by piece, wasn't on my desk. At first, I thought maybe they moved things somewhere else because of cleaning or repairs. But the more I looked around, the more I realized things weren't just moved, they were gone. I ran downstairs and found Vanessa in the kitchen, wiping the counter like nothing had happened. I asked her where my things were. She didn't even look surprised. She said she had a yard sale over the weekend to clear space and get rid of old junk. I asked if she was talking about my trophies from Little League, the necklace my mom left for me, and the computer I paid for myself. She didn't flinch. She said everything in the house had to have a purpose, and that I was too attached to sentimental clutter. I could barely speak. I checked the hall closet where my mother's jewelry box used to be. It was gone. The box that held my baseball trophies and medals from school competitions was missing. Even old photo albums I kept in a drawer were nowhere to be found. She treated things tied to memories, achievements, and pieces of my mother like yard trash. When my father came home, I told him exactly what she did. I thought he'd at least be angry that she sold my belongings without asking. Instead, he acted annoyed at me for making a scene. He said Vanessa told him she was getting rid of unusable items and that I should have been more careful about what I left around. I told him she sold my guitar and the computer I worked 2 summers to afford. He shrugged and said maybe it was time I let go of kid stuff. Hearing him defend her after everything she sold made me feel like I didn't matter at all. My mother's jewelry was the last thing I had left of her, and he treated it like it was nothing. Vanessa didn't apologize or act guilty. She just said the house looked better without extra belongings. I went back upstairs and sat in the empty room, feeling like I'd been erased along with everything I owned. That was the moment. When I went to my father that evening, I was still hoping he would finally understand how serious things had gotten. I stood in the living room while he sat on the couch scrolling through his phone. I told him again that Vanessa had sold my computer, my guitar, my trophies, and my mother's jewelry. I waited for him to react, to at least look upset or ask why she would do something like that. Instead, he sighed and set his phone down like I was interrupting something more important. He didn't ask a single question. He didn't even look surprised. He said I was overreacting and needed to calm down. I told him these weren't just random objects, and that she had no right to sell things that belonged to me, especially items that were connected to my mom. He didn't even flinch. He said Vanessa was trying to organize the house, and that I was making it harder by holding on to things that weren't useful anymore. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I reminded him my computer was something I bought myself. He shrugged and said I could always get another one someday. I asked about my mom's jewelry, and he said I shouldn't keep valuables lying around if I didn't want them misplaced. He made it sound like it was my fault for trusting that my belongings would still be there when I came home. When I kept pressing, his voice changed. He told me to get over it, because, according to him, I was making drama out of nothing. He said Vanessa meant well, and that I needed to stop blaming her for everything I didn't like. I told him it wasn't about liking or not liking. It was about respect and losing important parts of my life. He cut me off and said, "You're 18 now, Evan. Let it go and move on." That sentence hit me harder than anything else he'd said before. It wasn't just the words. It was his tone, cold, tired, like I was a burden he wanted to be done with. It made me realize he wasn't going to defend me or even try to understand me. He chose her side without hesitation. In that moment, I felt something shut down inside me. I realized I couldn't count on him for anything, not even basic support. After that, I didn't argue anymore. I just stood there, staring at him while he picked his phone back up and acted like the conversation was over. Vanessa walked into the room a few minutes later, pretending she didn't hear anything. She asked him if he wanted something for dinner and completely ignored me, like I wasn't even there. He answered her like nothing was wrong. Watching them talk so casually after what she'd done made me feel invisible. I went to my room, what was left of it, and sat on the floor because my chair was gone too. The space felt hollow and cold. I knew then that staying in that house wasn't safe for me emotionally or mentally. I had lost my things, but losing my father's support hurt more than anything Vanessa could have taken. That was the moment I stopped expecting him to change. Something inside me hardened. I knew I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I didn't make a scene when I left. I waited until the next morning when both my father and Vanessa were out. I didn't bother telling them where I was going or when I'd be back. I took a duffel bag and packed only what was still mine. Some clothes, a few books, a pair of sneakers, and the small things Vanessa hadn't touched. The room looked almost abandoned when I was done, but that's how she had left it anyway. I called my cousin Aaron before I left the house. He was my mom's nephew and one of the few people who truly cared about her. He answered on the first ring, and I didn't even have to explain everything before he told me to come over. He lived about 30 minutes away, so I took the bus with my bag on my lap. I didn't look back at the house when I walked down the street. When I got to Aaron's place, he opened the door before I even knocked twice. He took one look at me and knew something was wrong. I told him about the yard sale, what Vanessa sold, and how my father told me to get over it. Aaron didn't question my decision to leave. He didn't try to convince me to stay and work it out. He just nodded and said, "You did the right thing." He gave me his guest room and told me I could stay as long as I needed. The silence in his house felt different. It wasn't heavy or tense. I could breathe there. That first night, I slept without feeling like someone was waiting for me to leave. The next day, Aaron helped me figure out what to do next. He asked if I still had my important papers, my birth certificate, social security card, bank information, and school document. I told him most of it was still at the house. He drove me back while my father and Vanessa were at. I didn't go inside alone. Aaron came with me. I went straight to the desk drawer where I kept everything. Vanessa hadn't bothered with those, probably because she didn't see any value in things that couldn't be sold immediately. I gathered my documents and a few leftover items that were still in the closet. We didn't stay long. Aaron didn't say a word to my father when we left, even though he saw his car pulling into the driveway as we were backing it. I didn't look out the window to see if he noticed me. Later that week, Aaron helped me open a new bank account in my name so no one else could touch my money. He also suggested I file a quiet report about what Vanessa sold. I wasn't sure at first, but he said it was important to have something on record in case things got worse. We went to the local police station and filled out a property loss report. I listed my guitar, computer, trophies, and my mother's jewelry box. I didn't know if anything would come from it, but writing it down made me feel like I wasn't letting it all vanish without a trace. Aaron didn't treat me like a problem he had to fix. He treated me like family, something my own father failed to do. I didn't know what would come next, but for the first time, Aaron wasn't the type to let things slide once he knew someone had crossed a line. After I filed the report, he asked me if I was sure Vanessa hadn't done worse things behind the scenes. I told him I didn't know, but nothing about her surprised me anymore. He said people like her rarely stop at one kind of damage. He started by checking public records and online court databases. At first, we didn't find much, just old addresses and a previous last name she used before marrying my father. That was the name we didn't recognize, Vanessa Ridgway. Aaron said that was probably her maiden name, so we kept digging with that. One afternoon, Aaron pulled up my father's name in a credit search service he had access to through his job. He showed me something I hadn't expected. 2 credit cards I'd never heard of, both opened within the last year and both maxed out. The balances were thousands of dollars each. The mailing address on the accounts was my father's house, which meant Vanessa had to be the one opening them. That led us to wonder what else she was hiding. Aaron asked if my dad still had valuable things from before he married her. I told him about my grandfather's watch collection that my father kept in a wooden case inside his bedroom closet. He'd had those watches since before I was born. I remembered seeing the box the year before, but I hadn't checked it since. Aaron called one of his friends who worked at a pawn shop across town and asked him to search recent transactions under the name Ridgway. His friend checked the system and found multiple pawn slips with that last name from a few months ago. Among the listed items were men's watches described with brand names my father used to mention, pieces he always said he'd pass down someday. They were gone. We drove to the pawn shop to confirm, and the owner let us look at the paperwork. The ID scan, the signature, all of it matched Vanessa's information under her maiden name. She had taken those watches without my father's knowledge and sold them for quick cash. Aaron said if she was pawning things and opening credit lines secretly, the money had to be going somewhere. He searched bank records tied to her old name and found an account we didn't know existed. It wasn't connected to my father at all. Slowly, she'd been moving money there, withdrawals from the joint account she shared with my dad, plus whatever she made by selling things that didn't belong to her. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that my father had no idea. He was too focused on defending her to see what she was actually doing. He always took her word over mine, so he never questioned her access to his mail or his accounts. While he was busy calling me dramatic, she was spending his money and selling his belongings behind his back. I didn't feel bad for him, but I felt something different, distant. He chose to ignore every warning, and because of that, he let her tear into both of our lives without even noticing. Aaron said the truth would hit him eventually, and when it did, it wouldn't be quiet. I didn't plan to protect him from it. In a long time, I felt like I had a place where I wasn't being pushed out. Aaron didn't waste time once we found proof of what Vanessa had been doing. He told me I needed someone who understood the law and could make sure everything was handled the right way. He called his friend, Melissa Grant, an attorney he trusted. She agreed to meet with us that same week. When we sat down in her office, she let me tell the whole story without interrupting. I explained what Vanessa sold from my room, how she got rid of my mother's jewelry, and how my father told me to get over it. Then Aaron showed her the credit card records, the pawn slips, and the information about the secret bank account under her maiden name. Melissa didn't act surprised, but she took notes on everything. She said we could file legal claims for stolen property, destruction of sentimental items, and emotional distress. She explained that things tied to family, inheritance, or memory held value beyond money, and the court could recognize. She also said it didn't matter that my father tried to dismiss it. Those belongings were mine, and she sold them without consent. Melissa started building a list of everything Vanessa took and sold. She asked for any old photos of the items, purchase receipts, or messages that proved they belonged to me. I didn't have receipts for most things, but I had pictures with my guitar, trophies, and even a shot of my mom wearing one of the necklaces that was in the jewelry box. Aaron helped me gather everything on a flash drive. She also suggested filing reports with pawn shops and secondhand stores in the area, so there would be a record of the stolen good. She said even if we couldn't get the items back, it would help the legal process. Aaron helped type up descriptions and estimated values. We added my computer, guitar, trophies, keepsakes, and jewelry to the list. To support the part about the yard sale, Melissa said we needed witnesses. Aaron talked to a couple of neighbors who lived across from my father's house. They remembered seeing tables set up in the driveway that weekend and lots of people buying things. One of the neighbors, an older woman named Mrs. Davis, told us she saw one of my childhood photo albums on a table and thought it was strange. She agreed to write a statement. Melissa also filed paperwork about the watches Vanessa pawned. She contacted the pawn shop and sent copies of the documents showing the watches originally belonged to my father. She filed notices to prevent them from being sold further until ownership was sorted out. She explained that even though some of the stolen items belonged to my father, Vanessa selling them without his knowledge still counted as theft. But since my father didn't believe me and kept siding with her, Melissa focused first on the property that was clearly mine. Before we left her office, she told me something that stuck with me. She said people like Vanessa think they can get away with anything because no one stops them soon enough. She told me I was right to leave and even more right to take action. With every step, it felt less like I was just reacting to what happened and more like I was taking control for the first time. The damage was already done, but now. The visit happened on a weekday afternoon. I wasn't there, but Aaron drove me to the street and parked far enough away so I wouldn't be seen. Melissa had already sent the paperwork, and the police assigned a detective to follow up. His name was Detective Harmon, and he showed up at my father's door with a folder in his hand and a calm, serious tone. Later, Aaron told me what the detective described, and a neighbor confirmed parts of it too. My father answered the door thinking it was a mistake, or maybe something about the yard sale permit. Instead, the detective introduced himself and said he was there regarding multiple reports of stolen property tied to the house. At first, my father was confused. He said there must be some misunderstanding. The detective didn't argue. He opened the folder and started listing the items: my guitar, my computer, the trophies, the jewelry box, the watches, and more. He read off the estimated values, and that's when my father's expression changed. He had no idea the total added up to that much money. Vanessa came into the room halfway through. She tried to smile like she didn't know what was going on. The detective asked her directly if she sold the items in question. She said she only sold things that were abandoned and claimed she had my father's permission. My father looked at her and said he never agreed to anything being sold. She immediately changed her story and said I told her she could get rid of the stuff. The detective didn't react to her explanation. He kept asking clear questions. When she sold the watches, what name she used, where the profits went, how she had access to the credit cards tied to my father, and why she used her maiden name at pawn shops. Each question made her stumble more. When lying didn't work, she tried to cry. She said she was just trying to help the family and clean the house. She said she was stressed and overwhelmed. The detective listened but didn't let her twist things. He reminded her that selling property that doesn't belong to you is illegal, no matter the reason. He also mentioned that the jewelry and computer were listed under my name in the report, not hers. My father started asking questions then. He wanted to know about the bank account and the credit cards. Vanessa said she only opened them because he was too busy to handle things and that she planned to pay them back. When he asked about the watches, she said she thought he didn't care about them. He asked why she used her old name if she wasn't hiding anything. She didn't have an answer. The detective said that based on what was reported, prosecution was possible and restitution would be required. That meant she could face charges and would have to pay back what she took, or return whatever was still recoverable. Hearing the word prosecution made my father go quiet. Up until that moment, he thought everything I'd said before was exaggeration. Now someone in a badge was listing it to his face with evidence. The detective also said witnesses saw a yard sale and confirmed items belonging to me were sold without permission. He mentioned that photos and statements were already included in the file. Vanessa tried once more to shift the blame, saying I left the house, so I must not have cared about The detective ignored the excuse. I didn't talk to my father that day. I didn't need to. Aaron and I sat in the car until the detective came out and drove away. My father walked him to the door, but he didn't look angry at the detective. He looked stunned, like someone had pulled the floor out from under him. That was the first time I knew he finally understood that this wasn't something he could dismiss or blame on me. Something in his face had changed, and it wasn't going back. There was a record of it, and proof that she wasn't going to walk away clean. After the detective's visit, everything moved fast. My father finally saw the bills, bank statements, and credit reports that Melissa's team had already pulled. There were debts he didn't know existed, store cards, cash advances, and accounts opened in his name. Vanessa had taken out credit using his information, and now the companies wanted their money back. Some of it was tied to the things she sold, but a lot of it was just her spending. When the investigation followed up with the pawn shops, they provided paperwork with her signature. One of them had security footage. She had signed my father's name on a form to sell one of the watches. That turned the case from a dispute into a clear crime. Forgery, selling property without permission, and using fake details were all listed in the reports. The authorities didn't argue or delay. They treated it like any other theft case. News of the charges spread quickly. Small towns talk. Her name showed up in public court records, and people recognized. She tried to pretend it wasn't serious. But once she realized her face and details were on file, she packed her things and she didn't go quietly. She cried, blamed stress, blamed my father, said she was set up, said she was just trying to help. But none of it mattered anymore. The law didn't care why she did it. Their marriage collapsed almost overnight. There was no long argument, no drawn-out fight. It just snapped. When someone finds out the person they trusted robbed them and dragged their name into debt, there is nothing left to fix. My father didn't defend her after that. He didn't even try to explain it to anyone. He just let the damage sink in. Creditors started calling him. Some accounts were already past due. Collection letters showed up in his mailbox. He had to sit with lawyers and answer questions about what he signed and didn't sign. Even though he didn't commit the crimes himself, everything landed in his lap because it all happened under his roof and in his name. He had to untangle years of lies in a matter of weeks. Vanessa had nowhere to hide. She couldn't keep living there once the paperwork became official. The neighbors who bought things at the yard sale realized they might have bought stolen property. Pawn shops were notified to hold anything tied to my name. She lost whatever image she used to protect herself. She slipped out once she understood people weren't going to look the other way anymore. During all of this, my father started leaving voicemails. First it was short messages, then longer ones. He said he didn't know, said he was sorry, said he wanted to talk. I let every call go unanswered. I didn't block him, but I didn't respond either. After years of being ignored when I tried to speak up, I wasn't rushing to listen now that he finally cared. Aaron asked once if I wanted to call him back, and I said no. There was nothing to say yet. The mess Vanessa created wasn't just about items or money. It showed what my father allowed by refusing to see what was in front of him. The consequences were his now. He had to deal with the fallout, and I stayed. When the case went through, the court made it clear she was responsible for everything she took and everything she damaged. The restitution covered the value of my belongings, including the items that couldn't be recovered, and there was extra money added for the emotional harm and the trouble it caused. It wasn't about greed, it was about being acknowledged. The things she sold weren't just objects. Some of them were pieces of my childhood and memories of my mother. With that money, I didn't splurge or try to show off. I rented a small but clean apartment where everything inside belonged to me. I replaced what really mattered: my computer, some clothes, a new guitar, and a few personal items that helped me feel like myself again. I didn't try to rebuild the past. I just focused on starting fresh without anyone controlling my space or decisions. Vanessa couldn't escape what she'd done. Once the charges were finalized and the record was public, her job let her go. They didn't want someone with a theft and forgery case tied to their name. She tried to act like she was the victim of a misunderstanding, but no one believed her anymore. She was legally marked, and people treated her differently because of it. She had built her own downfall, piece by piece. My father felt the weight of everything after she left. He didn't have her to defend anymore, and he didn't have me to turn to. The house that she tried to control became quiet and empty. He had to deal with the financial cleanup, the embarrassment, and the reality that he pushed his own son away for someone who tore his life apart. He didn't say it to my face, but his silence said enough. He knew he'd chosen wrong, and nothing he said now would erase what happened. I didn't chase revenge in some dramatic way. I didn't scream, threaten, or make scenes. I simply let the truth do what it was supposed to do. Everything she did was brought to light in a legal way. She was the one who held the yard sale. She was the one who forged signatures. She was the one who thought no one would challenge her. All I did was show the evidence and step back. People sometimes think revenge means destroying someone, but that's not how this ended. I didn't destroy her. She set everything in motion herself. She lit the fuse and stood there smiling, thinking no one would notice the fire. All I did was watch it spread to where it belonged. Now I live on my own terms. I have my space, my peace, and my independence. I don't need their house or their approval. My father still reaches out sometimes, but I don't answer. Maybe one day I'll talk to him, maybe not. Right now, distance is what keeps me steady. What happened didn't break me. It cleared the path in front of me. She thought taking my things would make me powerless, but all it did was give me the chance to start over without her in my way. Silent, just like I did when the detective stood in his doorway.